All right, we're going to jump right in. I'd like to say good afternoon and welcome to everyone. We are thrilled to have you joining us for our leadership moment brought to you by Leadership Northern Colorado. We certainly want to do a shout out to our 2020 sponsors, Kaiser Permanente and Canvas, as well as all of our partners that help to create Leadership Northern Colorado and keep it as a functioning part of our community. And that includes the Fort Collins Chamber, the Greeley Area Chamber, the Loveland Chamber of Commerce, the Weld Community Foundation, and the Community Foundation for Northern Colorado. I'll turn it over to Don, but a couple of quick reminders. We encourage all of you to go ahead and put your microphone on mute so that you can interact or hear most effectively. The chat is live, and we encourage you to take advantage of that tool in order to share observations, thoughts, as well as to ask questions. Certainly feel free to use your emoji icons as you hear things that make you excited and want to share with others. Those are always encouraged. And we're looking forward to a wonderful conversation. So I'll turn it over to Dawn.
Thanks, Ann, and thanks everyone for being here today. So before we get started, Scott will be managing our chat. And so towards the end, we'll save some room towards the end. And Scott, if you can keep me, keep an eye on the time in case we start getting near the end and we're still talking. We want to make sure that we get to some of your questions. And just want to say that each of these short conversations is designed to connect you to some of Northern Colorado's most very interesting people. My name is Dawn. I'm on the steering committee for Leadership Northern Colorado, and I have been since the beginning of time. And I'll be the host for today's segment, which features Jaime Henning of the Greeley Area Chamber of Commerce. And we're so excited that you're here, Jaime, even though your little picture says Dawn. She just used the link that I sent her. So that's really Jaime. The person talking is Dawn, the one not talking is Jaime. And to set the stage for today's conversation, I want to let you know a little bit more about our guest. So Jaime Henning is the president and CEO of the Greeley Area Chamber of Commerce and Visit Greeley. Jaime has not yet celebrated her one-year anniversary and has kept the Greeley business community moving in a positive direction despite the heavy impact of the pandemic. Jaime is one of over 500 in the U.S. to earn the distinguished CCE certification. She sits on and has served the American Chamber of Commerce executives and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And one of her most proud accomplishments has been helping to train over 100 other chamber executives and helping found and direct Lincoln's Young Professionals group. It grew to over 1,800 members. Huge. One of the largest in the country, while serving as the senior director overseeing brand campaigns, air shows, that's awesome, Startup Week, advocacy work, and organizing a Guinness World Record attempt. Jaime is a native of Nebraska. She is a Cornhusker, but don't hold it against her. She grew up on a farm where her grandfather owned the local gas station and the grain elevator. Her mom and dad were business owners, so she comes to all of this very naturally. She earned her degree in corporate communications and public relations, and Jaime and her wife, Carrie, live in Greeley with their Black Lab Ranger. And Carrie is a bird biologist and water expert and works for the city of Fort Collins on the Halligan Water Project. We're very excited that you're here, Jaime. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's really nice to be among friends again. Great to see you, Dawn and Ann, and the rest of the team. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we have some questions, and I did send those to you ahead of time. We have a bonus surprise question, so be on the lookout for that. So we'll just get started with the questions. So what characteristics or skills do you think that all leaders should possess?
Well, I think, when you start leaning into leadership positions, and it really is not dependent on area of industry or nonprofit or leaders elected. Just honesty, integrity, and ethic come into play every single day. Looking at the judgment calls you make, there is no playbook for being a leader and making the right decisions and doing the right things and taking the next step. So I would say those are high on the list. I think nobody wants to follow anybody who isn't excited about what they do. So if you have passion and commitment for the kind of work you do, heaven knows I do. I moved my life across the country to do the work. I couldn't imagine doing anything other than working for the Chamber of Commerce. I fell in love with it many, many years ago and drank the Kool-Aid. So once you do that, if you don't have excitement and passion and commitment, I don't know how you lead a team. I think you hopefully are the most positive and confident person in the room. Along with that confidence, hopefully you don't bear a lot of ego, because you learn right away. You know, bearing a lot of humility and empathy for other people is really important. And then I think just being a really strong communicator, and we all fall down on that sometimes, right? But if you have a vision but you can't communicate it, you're not better off. So just being a good communicator. And if you're a nonprofit director, you understand that goes a lot of directions to your team, to your outside community, to your board of directors, and lots of other audiences. So if you're lucky enough to serve the way I do as a nonprofit director, you understand communication's pretty key. So those would be the couple things I'd share with the group.
That's awesome. And yes, communication certainly key. And so pretty much everything, I would agree. Is there a mistake that you see leaders make often?
I think most leaders have a sense of where they want to go, right, and a vision. But I think communicating that, I think your team kind of checks you every day. Are you passing that along? Are you bringing others along with you? Are you engaging your boards and your team internally and your community broad to make sure that they understand where you want to go? I think being a leader every day, and I've actually performed this exercise with people who've told me they want to lead on my team, is like pulling out a mirror and looking in it. If you're not able to accept radical feedback every day and you're not ready to give it, you're probably not ready to be a leader. So I think I've struggled along the way with some of that. I think everybody does, but I think those are kind of critical points. I think also understanding how people tick and what makes them motivated and how they learn. There's no way to really move things ahead unless you really understand the dynamic of that team and kind of pulling it together. So I'm also kind of a yes man, yes woman. I can accept this. So taking on too much and not really drilling down to what's important. I gave a speech about a week ago about the book Essentialism. If you haven't read it, you should read it. It's like the story of COVID, how to get down to what's important and just do those things. So I think all leaders find themselves in that spread too thin mentality, but knowing what's important and really digging into it, that's where the good stuff is, the magic is. So
awesome. And that is a great book, by the way. Good stuff. What are the most important decisions that you make as a leader? Daily and kind of long term.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, definitely your team. You're not on an island, and whoever you decide to have on that team, be that team members you inherited or people you bring in, you hope they're a reflection of your kind of space and judgment, right? You want people who can act when you're not in the room and who are a good reflection of the mission and goals and values of the organization, but also of you as the leader. So your team is the most important part, and that may sound a little cliche, but it's real. And I inherited a lot of good leaders, and I hope to grow this with some new ones that you'll find, and that's some of the hardest work you do and the most important work you do. Also, I think some of the most important decisions are first impressions. I came here from another state. I knew no one in Greeley. So I knew no one in the region. I knew no one in the state very well, you know, maybe one or two transplants. So I really spent a lot of time in my first 6 months here. And thank goodness I did pre-COVID. I was able to actually meet Don for coffee in person, and it was awesome. So I think really just getting to know people, everything's built on those relationships, everything, trust and movement and collaboration. So I'm glad I had those first few months to do that. And ideally you spend a little bit of time inside too. I spent a lot more out. So I'm getting to really find that with my team too now, which has been good. And then I think as a nonprofit leader, I asked a few CEOs for advice before I took my step in job as the leader in Greeley. And I said, what do you think I need to know? And one of them said, if you're a nonprofit director, your board needs to feel engaged, loved, and heard. And if those things don't happen, you're in big trouble. And so so I think if you realize you have a team of 27 people, like I do, I have a big board, they bring a lot of skills to bear, and a lot of the good things that have happened during COVID are because they said, how fast can we get it done? How can we help? So I'm pretty blessed there too. So
that's awesome. It is good that you were able to, you know, meet some people in person before everything went on lockdown, so that you had, you know, those relationships to build on that you needed, you know, to do things during COVID. So thank God for that.
right.
What do you think the biggest challenge is, that besides COVID maybe, or maybe alongside COVID, what is the biggest challenge that you faced as a leader?
No, that's fair. You know, I think in a lot of ways, most leaders either happen into their position. I don't know how intentional they are about it. I'll be completely transparent and honest, because I think that's needed more than ever from leaders. I spent 7 years trying to think about whether I was going to step up and out of my organization. I worked there for 19 years, so I was in a place of comfort, and I could pick my team, and I knew who my leader was. I also watched her every day, and I had no illusions about how hard the job would be, right? I was kind of the person who was there through a lot of that. So I think just out of my own loyalty and comfort, it was a little scary to step up and take the lead. So I think the biggest challenge is making the decision that you're in love with the industry you're in, moving states, moving organizations, and stepping up. So, you know, I think in a lot of ways, I ended up learning my leadership skill, because every time there was a gap in the organization, I said, how can I help? What can I do? How can I learn that? So, you know, for people who wear a lot of hats, that's probably the good advice for people not in a leadership position, is just always step in and try to be helpful. And if you do, you'll learn a lot. So for me, I think the challenge was really just stepping out of my comfort zone entirely to take that big step, and having the confidence to do it, and knowing I could manage what comes. So
you say that it took you 7 years to kind of make that leap. So what was there one thing at the end of those 7 years, or in the midst of those 7 years, that you said, okay, it's time for me to make the leap?
Yeah, to be really honest and transparent again, the site selector who called me over and over and said, hey, you're sitting on these boards and we know people you've advised to go start in their leadership role. Why don't you do it? They asked me in January of last year. So now that you decided to do it, is this just like, you know, a whim or a fancy, or is it like a New Year's resolution? And I said, yeah, every year for the last 7 years. I mean, at some point you just have to commit yourself. And I think once you commit yourself and you say yes and you start to step into it, good things happen. So Greeley presented itself to me in a moment when I was open to it. And when I finally said, okay, I'm ready for this, I can do this. And I had a really great crop of just a lot of other chamber professionals around the country who cheered me on, ear to the ground, and said, you got this, and we'll be there for you when you encounter any kind of turbulence. So it's been good. It's been really good.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's great. Just want to remind everybody, so if you have questions, you can type them into the chat as you're thinking of them, so that we can get to those towards the end. So kind of a little different tact here. So what's your favorite book, or who's your favorite leader, and what did you learn from it/them? Or you can do both. If you have a favorite book and a favorite leader, you can tell us both.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard because I am an avid reader. It would be really, really hard to pick one child, so to speak. But if I had to, I would say around the work I do, when you're trying to kind of gain sense of community and mission, I think Start With Why by Simon Sinek really just in a moment kind of made me understand that it wasn't about what I was trying to encourage people to do. It was about what they intrinsically felt and how they connected to my organization. So I'd have to say that's pretty pivotal. I love about everything he does, but I love Seth Godin. I love so many authors. It's really hard. I'm kind of a big Glennon Doyle Melton fan right now, so I love her new book, Untamed. There's a lot. If you ever want a book list from me, I'll happily share it. I did the other day with someone I was talking to. So so much good to be gained from that, right? And getting you outside of yourself in your own head. So
that's great. Is there a leader, a favorite leader that you have? Or
you know, I watched
more than one.
Yeah,
it's hard to narrow that one down too.
Well, it's hard. I watched actually this show on the Sundance Channel called Iconoclasts. and they basically put two leaders together and they interview each other. But in it, Richard Branson and past presidents and Desmond Tutu, they all get together and they form this group of like thought leadership. And I thought that was so kind of amazing, because it's kind of hard to pick any one person with any one background, but kind of all the value comes from the sharing. So it's a pretty cool show. They pick, you know, an artist, they pick people with dissimilar backgrounds to talk to about kind of what the leadership lessons are they've learned. So I'm pretty in love with that show. I could watch it over and over and over. But I would say all those people bring good, you know, Richard Branson's a crazy risk taker, and whether we love him personally or not, he's done some interesting things. I think Desmond Tutu has a lot of spirituality and just brings a lot of good to the world. So, you know, everybody brings their little piece to it, but I was pretty entranced with that. So
that's awesome. And it reminds me of how you guys all, and by you guys, I mean all of the leaders of the chambers in Northern Colorado, work very closely together and really well. And my colleagues in the rest of the state, it's not always the way it rolls in other places. So, you help set the bar for that, as does Ann and everybody else at the chambers. And, that there's enough for everybody and that you guys can all work together, especially now, is important, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. When I came in, I put this poster on my desk and I gave this gift to all my staff that said collaboration over competition. I watched that not be the case for a lot of years. In the economic development world, it was pretty, critically brash about how to step up over other communities, and it's not the new way. And COVID's gonna really teach people it's not the new way. But yeah, we're pretty blessed in Northern Colorado to have some amazing leadership. David's been there a long time, and was just accepted to a new fellowship nationally to help us through the recovery. Mindy and Loveland, just really good people and really smart people. So each community brings a little different brand and way, but together we're a powerhouse. So it's pretty amazing to be part of that.
That's great. Okay, here's the bonus question. So what was your first job? How old were you at said job? And what do you think was the biggest lesson that you took from that first job?
Oh my gosh. Well, I grew up on a farm, and I was certainly not all that deep in the farm handiwork, if I'm really honest about it. But my dad did, because my dad just couldn't bring himself to deal with these coyotes we had on our land. We ended up with some bottle calves that we had to feed and nurture. And when I would get on the bus every day, because I was the kid that, got on the bus first and last every day, bottle calf chores were my duty. And I don't think I was paid for it. I did a lot of, chopping cane in high school and doing other things, shatter cane. I think for the most part, I just learned that digging in and doing the work was really important, and that my dad was so hardworking, and my mom. I mean, my mom went back to school to get her college degree after all three of us kids were naughty and pulling the TV set off the end table and things like that. So she went back and became one of the longest standing chefs for the governor of Nebraska ever. And that was maybe the third in reinvention of a job. So my parents both are really hardworking kind of reinventionists. So I think that was the lesson I learned from them. They're pretty cool people. So
that's amazing. That's really great. Well, that's all of the questions that we have lined up, but if anybody has questions in the chat, Scott, throw it to you.
I was messaged in the chat, so I'm going to read it off. And while I'm doing that, I'm encouraging everybody else to take this opportunity to ask your questions, because we are fortunate today to have a few extra minutes. Carrie Rossman asked the question that I had written down on the side myself, so it's very similar to my question anyway. And Carrie's question is, has the chamber had to pivot to serve Greeley businesses during the COVID? And what are some of the lessons learned?
Yeah, no question. I think the chamber industry as a whole is doing that, and I can dig into how Greeley's doing it. But someone said, the chamber industry is reinventing itself right now. And I heard Chris Mead, who's a big thought leader in the industry, say, no, that's not true at all. The chamber's just getting back to what they were made for, which was business survival. That's why we organized in the first place, a very long time ago. And I think we're just getting back to that. How do we serve those businesses services in those ways. So when you look at Greeley's kind of, I think, successes during this time period, I'll give a lot of credit to that real go-getter of a board of directors I get to work with every day. They scrambled right away and said, what can we do immediately? So we started a business response task force of our elected officials, business leaders, nonprofit leaders on day 2 of COVID. And out of that came the Greeley Recovery Fund. So we raised about $600,000 to form a stand-up fund out of a foundation that maybe, we work with, but we hadn't been as active on. And to date have awarded 82 businesses with small business grants that were given to them. Their financials were reviewed to make sure that they had what it takes and great ideas to move ahead. But we think we helped them in the gap in ways that they may not have made it otherwise. So I think that was incredibly meaningful work. The other thing we're doing is being really great communicators, I think. So we started something called Chamber Coffee, Common Grounds. If you get a chance and you want to connect to who we are and get to know us a little better, we just did one this morning on tourism. Tourism is one of the hardest hit industries in the country, and it's also maybe makes up 1 in 10 jobs. So it's incredibly important. We actually bear the city's contract for visitor services along with the chamber activities we do. And so this morning we told that story. We put every champion of tourism in Greeley on that call, the mayor, the city communicators, some of our local attractions, and then we talked about it. So I think that show has given us a chance. Our goal was to launch that live in Greeley so we could all be together. And about the second week of COVID, I realized, hey, this might be a long haul and we can't wait until we're back together. We need to get together virtually, which now is about all we do, right? All day. But it was a good chance to tell the story of a lot of different areas. So, and it also gave, our elected officials talked to me when I first got here about how, they do city council meetings and maybe 17 people tune in virtually or otherwise. And so it's given us a chance to collaborate where we might not have seen each other more than once a month or once every 2 or 3. We're talking really consistently about the challenges together. We're looking each other in the face and solving some of that. So I'm proud of some of those accomplishments and the way we're working together because that's what's really important. So.
Thank you. I have another question from Bill Becker. I'll read it here. It says, Greeley has a number of strong communities in your orbit with strong and independent thinking folks. How do you find navigating what is good for the whole while nurturing and respecting these community leadership personalities?
That's a great question. Yeah, this is definitely true. I come from a family, Bill, that pretty much, what is it they say you shouldn't talk about religion and politics, maybe? Those are the dangerous territories. That's all my family wanted to talk about. So I learned quickly how to have a respectful conversation. John Gates and I were talking, our mayor, last week, and he made a statement and I embellished it a little bit. But he said, we may not always agree, but respect. And I said, is served up at the table. I do think that that's where we have to be. We do have a lot of strong personalities. Leaning into COVID, we had different sectors of our electorate that came out differently on the issues about how they thought we should move forward. But I think in the end, we were all able to kind of step into it. And what we're trying to do, at least, is create a collective voice. And I think in that, I have some other strong leaders who are willing to come together when it's important. On the small things or different issues that are important to business, we may all come at it a little differently or disagree. But at the end of the day, there has to be a personal perspective to it where we can all get together on the important things and represent our larger city and region. So I think there are a lot of good people who are willing to do that. It's not always easy. It's the hardest work in a lot of ways. But I think we see each other enough and we see each other as people, and there's been some trust developed that we just have to work toward that. So that's what we try to do.
All right. Thank you very much. This is kind of our last chance for questions as far as typing them in, but I just thought of maybe we have some listeners just on the phone. So feel free to speak up if you have some questions. And if not, we'll turn it back over to Dawn.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jaime, for joining us today and changing your name.
I'll be Dawn any day.
Yeah, I don't know. And so we're going to wrap up today. And I want to thank you, Jaime, for being here, Scott, for handling the chat, and for all of you for joining us today. And I think Ann is going to actually wrap it up. Is that right, Ann?
Sure thing.
Okay.
We, again, want to thank everybody for joining us. We hope that you're finding these conversations helpful. We'll be uploading the video onto our Facebook page as well as leadershipnortherncolorado.com, so keep an eye out for that. We certainly want to remind you of our next conversation, which will be September 8th. September 8th at 3:30 p.m. and Chief Jeff Swoboda from Fort Collins will be our featured speaker. So we look forward to having you join us for that. We will certainly be sending you links for you to register, and we hope that you have an amazing, amazing Tuesday, and we'll see you in about a month. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.